cycle of once I say I'm sorry or I've asked for forgiveness. For example, if I beat my children or do something horrible, but then apologize the next day, that somehow, once I've asked for forgiveness, that the slate is wiped clean, so to speak. And I think that's part of their own way of coping with what they've done, in addition to looking presentable in the community or at the church or things like that.
And then one day, my mom really beat me so badly. And then I asked her, why are you beating me? She said, because you remind me of my ex-husband. And I remember that at one point, I was beaten one day so much that I was pushed through a glass door, what they call the French doors. And then I got marks on my right hand. And these marks, actually, I did go to the hospital, and I do have medical records to show that I actually attended some treatment. And so I got all these scars on my hands because of the glass. It was a very deep cut. And I remember, since I was also put outside overnight.
When you listen to what the client was saying, you realize that it really affects the kid in a way that maybe psychologically, which now extends to when violence comes in, then there's that physical violence as well.
Right.
How do we guide kids in this kind of a situation?
Right. I think it's extremely confusing for children because they're basically getting two completely mixed messages. At its extreme, I love you, I hate you, all within maybe a span of 10 minutes. And so I think that's incredibly confusing for children. I think in addition to the fact that children have a natural proclivity to protect their parents and to trust their parents and to have faith in their parents. And so they begin to rationalize some of those things too, and then it starts the distortion process with themselves. They can even begin to think, I did something to deserve this, or if, like the woman had said, if I had cleaned up those shoes, this wouldn't have happened. So they start to, look for ways to change their own behavior and sort of buy into this distorted process. And I think it takes an incredibly strong person to be able to see that there's actually a distortion going on there. And that's often why children are especially vulnerable, because they don't have someone telling them, no, this is wrong, and what you're experiencing is not okay. Because children tend to be somewhat mystical thinkers too, and so they can believe things that aren't reality, and their sense of reality becomes very distorted.
Another thing that I was also curious about is the way the lady treated the kids. It was some kind, like you're saying, some kind of thinking that she had within herself. And now, when you look at this situation, I was just wondering, and I'm really curious to know, and I know even our viewers at home are really curious to know, what drives a person to that point where they see this is a cover-up indeed? Because I think when they start that process, to some extent they're cautious of what they're doing. And that's why they keep on covering and covering and covering until it's out of hand, until they also themselves, they tend to kind of believe in what they're doing. How does one go to that corner and not know that I'm going towards the direction?
You see, sometimes you say you live a lie until you believe it. It becomes a habit, and slowly it becomes a way of life. Once it becomes a way of life, it's very hard to divorce from the lie to the reality. For this perpetrator at that particular point, and that's why we say they're ill. They have distorted their thought patterns from when they were really small. It has not just started. It's a coping mechanism that they acquired with time. And until they get that awareness, it's wrong. And some of them end up not getting that awareness. Or somebody challenges that distorted way of thinking. They never get that insight that there's something wrong with me. It becomes that everyone else is saying it's wrong, but for this particular person, depending on what they're going through, because we also have things like personality disorders who believe what they say is true, you cannot convince the person that they're on their own. They have made that world for themselves, and their reality remains their reality, and they expect everyone else to see their reality as the whole truth, and that's not being open to other people's perception of life.
If we connect this spiritually, in the spiritual world or the religious world, there is faith. Then there's a kind of faith that one person lives in and another person lives in. How can you connect this kind of a behavior to the spiritual world?
Many people, as they live life according to what they have received. And as they continue to receive, they believe what they have received, and especially if they were taught at home, then they receive that and they believe them who have taught them. And if they have received it in the street or in school, also they will believe that and them who have taught them. To bring in, for them to know the difference, there has to be, like we have a formula. And then the formula is, you have to remove them from what they believe in to another world. And then the world which we can talk of, there's no any other world we can talk of except the world of the spirit, which is the Bible. So it means whatever they have learned this side and whatever they have learned on the other side, so we have to remove them and then give them a new mind, and then the new mind, the focus, may only be on the Word of God. And then we'll now wash their mind and will now realign their heart, even may also change the life, the pattern of life that they had acquired before. So they have to be removed and they have to be given a new life. A new life which is a new thing that maybe they had not known, but it has to be within the holiness of the Word of God. So faith comes by hearing. And then sometimes you can hear from parents, you can hear from peer group, you can hear from teachers, whichever way. But the right thing must now be brought in, and then we have to diverge and then go to the right way.
Some evenings she was really nice. It was not throughout, so I'm saying it's sporadic. And so especially when there were visitors visiting over, she would even make us sing in front of the visitors. We are a very musical family. Up to now, I am very musical. And that's something I borrowed from her because she was a musician. Sadly, she died in 2010. But I can say that especially when there were no visitors, she was really, 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 really cruel to us. And it was not to all of us. She, especially like if she wanted to beat my firstborn sister and myself, she would tell the secondborn and the fourthborn girls to go and sleep. So it would just be the firstborn and the thirdborn.
Pastor, you spoke about, the evil nature that is in man, that waits for an opportunity so that it can reveal itself. Maybe we start with you, Pastor. Does environment, to some extent, influence the behavior of these perpetrators?
People living with this mind that the supreme is not God. The supreme are the people around them. Now, the supreme being the people around them, they tend to draw the attention of the people to see them as good people. And then when they are seen as good people, then they can also be glorified. Even people can always say they are good people. But now, on the other hand, they are failing to know that God, who is the creator of everything, is not only seeing our goodness, but also goes beyond and sees the inner man. So people not knowing this, they have this mind, when I have visitors, I can hide my nature by saying, welcome, do well to them, treat children the right way. But when they have left, then the real character, the real inner man now reveals. And this is what in the initial term we gave it hypocrisy. So many people, I'm sorry to say, especially Christians, they are living in the world of hypocrisy. And when they live in the world of hypocrisy, then this hypocritical type of life is affecting the people around them, and does not give peace at all unto them. And you know, if such a people, they can reveal their real self when others are there, then they are getting the chance to be corrected. But when they cannot reveal, after people they have gone is when now their real self comes out, then for them to be corrected, for them to know that they are wrong, is not easy, even for themselves. And then this is affecting people around them. So being what we are can help, because neighbors can see, friends can see, and they can also pinpoint and correct us. But if we hide as if we are good, then it is a very big problem to them that are under us or that we are bringing up.
Didi, they, you know, what we're looking at the influence here that environment has, like Pastor just explained, you know, when visitors are around, bring the kids, sing for the visitors, and everything is okay, and she's a loving mom. But when the visitors step out, the environment changes, and there's a completely different person altogether.
Right. I think it really illustrates that these are behaviors that the person is choosing to engage in. You know, I think putting on this persona of being sort of a good Christian family or having good values when other people are there, and also sort of marginalizing the father, keeping him out, is part of the power system. You know, if other people, including the father or these other people, have an inkling of what's going on behind the scenes, then she loses her power over what she can do behind the scenes. But somehow she's able to maintain herself in certain situations. So it shows you that she has a capacity to overcome and change her way of thinking, so that she can maintain that control all of the time.
There's also another point that came up, and I would like to, you know, connect this to this discussion that we're having right now about kids and the change of, you know, partner in behavior. First, I would like to engage Pastor. There is these things that people believe are, let me use again the word, inherited behaviors, or some people call them like generational curses. You know, when you look down that family tree, you find, you know, divorces and stuff like that. Pastor, how real are these generational curses, if they are there?
Good. In the world that I'm dealing with the world of Christianity, and more so spiritual world. And as we deal with the spiritual world, it means we have two types of world. We have the physical world and we have the spiritual world. In the physical world, this generation curses or generation pattern, they do affect and they happen. And not only that, but also when we go back to the Bible, there's this one man called Abraham. He lived with his wife, Sarah, for a number of years without children or without a child. And then later, after 25 years, after the promise, there's one child called Isaac that came up. Then even Isaac in his life also, after marrying Rebekah, it took some time for him to get a child. And this also was somehow a problem. And then when we come to Jacob, also Jacob, the first wife was to be Rachel. And then when you look at Rachel now, because, okay, according to the customs of those days or those people, either the firstborn should be married first and then the secondborn. But in this case, Jacob had fallen in love with Rachel, not Leah. But even though Leah became the first wife of Jacob, but according to the heart of Jacob, that was not so. So to Jacob, Rachel was the first wife to him. But now, how about Rachel? It took a long time for Rachel to give birth, even for the first son to come up. So when we look at this generation gap or the generation pattern, we see sometimes it works. But it always changes when we come to the spiritual world.